Okay, I was nice yesterday. Got a lot of response. Today it's time to take the gloves off. Come listen to what Pav has to say. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Listen to Pavarotti. Can I be your superhero?
Hello, welcome to The Revealing. I'm your host, Pavarotti. I'm here to discuss the Idaho 4 case. And in this video, I'm just going to go ahead and take the gloves off. If you don't want to see Pav take the gloves off, then change the channel, because somebody with 30 years in forensic studies and working on all these major cases with all this experience and making statements like he has in public about certain people in this case should really know more than he knows and should not be making misleading statements to the public, which throws up major red flags for me as it relates to Dr. Turvey. Let me show you what I mean.
After the Dateline leak, there was an administrative investigation by the court at the direction of the judge, all right, to find out who that leak was. An administrative investigation, okay? That's investigation number one. That investigation was completed, a report was filed, and that file was sealed, okay? You can see it in the documents. It's a sealed file. It's public. It's public, but it's there and sealed.
So the first trust but verify should be pretty easy. I mean, he says that you can see it on the docket that investigation was over and they posted it to the docket, and you can see it right here that, you know, it's over and it's sealed. But then again, I study this stupid docket every day, and there's nothing on here that shows anything about that investigation or it being done or it, just staying sealed. I mean, these are just standard orders on everything in the case so far about unsealing the sealed documents, and there's nothing on here that even resembles what Dr. Turvey said that I should find when I look on here. So I don't even know what he's talking about, and I mean, it doesn't exist, so I guess he's making it up. But I do know this: as you go through the progression here, like I said, this right here is the last order unsealing documents, because the state had a problem with it. They wanted to reconsider unsealing documents. That was December 18th. And there hasn't been anything since then that even comes close to even talking about unsealing anything. In fact, the last thing was a month ago on the amended order of restitution, and there's been nothing since. So if he is correct and that investigation was over into December to January, that seems to be a strikingly suspicious time, because that's when they stopped unsealing documents. So there's number one. And if I am correct and the defense has a play in motion, then it's probably been in motion since that special prosecutor report came back. And that's why the judge stopped unsealing things, because the judge knows what's coming, in my humble opinion. If I'm right, if I'm wrong, nothing matters. But I'm going to always say what I think is right. And I think this all leads me to my conclusion. But here's something else you need to understand.
And I thought that was it. I thought it was all done. Then in January, I got contacted by the Ada County Sheriff's Department, a guy who said, I'm a detective and I have I'm in charge of, me and two other officers are in charge of conducting a criminal investigation into the NBC data leak.
It talks about the special prosecutor investigation. If it was anybody like judges, court clerks, bailiffs, private defense attorneys, prosecutors, and police officers, they are all considered officers of the court. If the special prosecutor found that the leak came from any of these folks, then you would have seen a contempt of court charge, or maybe there is a contempt of court charge being processed against somebody and we just haven't seen it, which I feel like is likely the case. So my point is, the special prosecutor investigation into the leak is complete. The defense team's not waiting for the sheriff's department's criminal investigation to be complete, because that's not material to the case. The investigation that was material to the case is done, which means if I'm right, we're going to see any day a filing from the Koberger defense team. We're not going to have to wait till this other investigation is done. This other investigation by the Ada County Sheriff's Department is investigating people outside of the officers of the court, actual citizens who committed a separate crime from the leak, such as bribery or something like that. That's the way that works. So we're not waiting for anything. This is about to happen if I'm right.
Which is why I was happy to discuss the publicly disclosed elements of this case as they relate to chain of custody for the sheath and as they relate to the untested DNA evidence from the hair found in Ethan's hand.
Okay, first I want to discuss the three things that he's bringing to light here. The first one, because all three of these things he's really attributing to a lack of lawyering by the defense team. And he talks about the chain of custody on the sheath, the location of where the sheath was found, and the hair in Ethan's hand. Well, let's take these one at a time. First of all, chain of custody on the sheath. And we've already kind of been through this, but in Idaho, whenever you have issues with a chain of custody, a defense attorney can take it two ways. One, they can file pretrial suppression. But what happens is they'll bring in everybody, even people, if they forgot to sign the chain of custody, they will bring them in during oral testimony, and all they have to do is take the stand and say, yeah, I had it this time and I didn't sign it. And it's called curing the chain of custody. And in Idaho, that's exactly what they'll do. They'll bring them in, they'll testify, they'll cure the chain of custody, and it becomes a non-issue. Or the other route is just wait for trial, do the same thing, and then the judge can instruct the jury to give less weight to the evidence if issues are brought up and not rectified. This is simply trial strategy, and Ann Taylor and team, I believe, would know that if they filed a pretrial suppression motion, that all they would do is bring in everybody and cure the COC, the chain of custody, which is why you didn't see a pretrial motion for suppression on it. So him putting all of his weight on the chain of custody doesn't really align with Idaho law. So I think that's, again, what Ann Taylor and team means by him speaking outside of his expertise. He's obviously not an attorney. You see, when I go back to the Franks motion, which would have been filed just a couple of months, if even that, after Turvey came on to the case, and I start going through and looking at what the defense had listed as far as their exhibits or memorandums in support of the Franks, you know, I see things like what he's discussing with screenshots from Nunez's body cam. I mean, I believe that would have pertained to the location of the sheath. Then you have, for instance, the hairs. The only lab reports that we have never seen in this thing that the FBI conducted, because the ISP lab conducted all the other lab reports. So if the FBI conducted a lab report, we've never seen it, but I can see right here on 127 and 228, the defense had listed in their exhibits, FBI, fibers, hair, no connection. Fibers, hair, no connection. So the defense had it listed in their Franks motion for there being no connection from the hair found to Brian Koberger. I can only assume because we've never seen these FBI lab reports. And I'm only basing that based on the fact that it says FBI hairs because of what Turvey has said.
So it was, this is not secret. This is something that everybody knows. It was submitted to the FBI for macroscopic, not microscopic, but macroscopic examination, which means looking at the physical features of the hair, the length, the color, the shape, the curls, all that good stuff that you can describe. And they excluded it as coming from Brian Koberger. In other words, they could tell this did not belong to Brian Koberger. Wrong color, too long, all that good stuff. Okay? Now, the next question is, let's test it and find out whose it is. Nobody wanted to test it. And that is also not secret because it was never tested. Because it was never tested, we can infer that nobody wanted it tested, not either side.
Now, first of all, to say you can infer that the defense didn't want it tested is not a very good inference, considering the defense had trouble getting anything tested in the case. Law enforcement's the one that's supposed to test stuff and do investigations on stuff. And it didn't happen on unknown male B, blood on the handrail. It didn't happen on the L5 bloody fingerprint. Didn't happen on unknown male D, blood on the gloves outside. So what makes you think that they could get something tested on some hair? And why is none of these three things being mentioned by Whitcomb or Turvey, the three biggest pieces of evidence in the case that actually excludes Brian Kohberger from the crime? They want to focus on this hair, which is well and good. I think it is important. But then again, when I look at this hair and I hear what he says it was long blonde hair. Yet when I look at it in the picture that we found of this hair that he's talking about, I mean, unless my eyes are deceiving me, this hair doesn't look long and blonde to me. It looks long and black and kind of frizzy, like maybe a non-Caucasian. I don't know. But if they did macro examinations and excluded Kohberger from being the contributor to the hair sample, well, then that's all the defense needs to exclude Kohberger. It's up to the investigators in the case, the law enforcement, to figure out whose hair that belonged to, unless they already knew.
Was any DNA found on that knife sheath ever directly tied to Brian Kohberger?
Not that I'm aware of.
Well, then why are we seeing that all over the place, that people are saying that Brian Kohberger's DNA was found on the sheet?
It is right now. You guys are smart people. I like you guys. You're smart. So how many things do you see daily being discussed about this case that have no basis in reality?
Quite a lot.
Tons.
Yeah.
So much bullshit.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's the answer.
So I know in the book, well, actually, initially, the first crime lab that the sheath was sent to, they returned it saying there's no chain of custody, right?
In Texas, no, that was you're confusing two different events. Right?
Yeah.
One is the Idaho State Police Crime Lab. They are the ones who originally said, "Hey, we got the sheath now. I need a chain of custody form for this because there's not one on it." So they asked for one, and a few days later, Moscow police sent them one that they had fabricated. All right. Then there's the other issue of the testing of the DNA on the sheath, which is about on the clasp, which was done at the lab in Texas, I think. The initial testing. But so these are two separate issues.
And
The
what
lab in
was,
Texas, Othram.
Sorry, what?
Was that Othram Labs? The lab in
believe-
Texas?
I can't recall independently. The DNA was not my part, was not my area of expertise. The DNA interpretation is not my area of expertise. What I know is that at the Frank's hearing, pretty much everyone agreed that the DNA that they found was an investigative lead and not sufficient to make an identification.
Now, this is where I got a little bit of problem with what Turvey's saying here. And that's why I say I don't like it when, people that are supposed to be helping the cause come out and try to mislead, because even the guilters are going to be aware of all the facts around this. For some reason, people on our side seem to get confused on this very easily. I'm going to give Ron there a pass, because a lot of people are confused on this. And when Turvey says, not that I'm aware of, well, I mean, how are you not aware of the only piece of evidence in the case that was damaging against Brian Kohberger because of the way that they produced their statistic of the match? And he goes on to point out the Othram Labs IgG and how that couldn't be matched to Kohberger. Yet, if you were even vaguely familiar with the case, you would know that Othram didn't create the DNA profile sample first. The ISP lab did, entered it into CODIS, and we've got the documentation on that. That happened. And then after they obtained the buccal swab from Kohberger, then they performed the match. We've got the lab report where it says 5.67 octillion to 1 compared to the random population. So for you to ignore that and say they never tried to match it to Brian Kohberger, and that's all just the lies like you hear in the media, is straight up just misrepresenting facts in the case. Facts that you should be aware of if you're not. Now, I'll give him a break. He said he's not the DNA expert. Maybe he's confused. It seems to be a subject that confuses many, but he should be aware of that. And I would think that he would be aware of that. So I don't understand why he would even try to throw smoke on that, because that's just not true. And if he wasn't aware of it, he should have been.
But I can say that the white claw box had blood on it, and you can see it photographed in different places around the scene.
All right, now once again, so he's going to mention the white claw box. And all I can assume is, like Whitcomb put in his book that he obviously got from Turvey, is their misinterpretation of where the White Claw box was, which would have messed up his entire analysis on this. Because you can see this is the very first body cam of Nunez as he's going through the house, chasing Hunter back to the front here. And see this White Claw box and where it's sitting right here towards the end of this? That's the original position of the White Claw box. The blood that was the transfer of Ethan was found on the other side of this White Claw box, probably a little bit on the box and a little bit on the railing right there. But Whitcomb, instead of watching these body cams, I guess, he goes through the photographs of the crime scene where there's many positions for many things, and he comes to the conclusion that the White Claw box is actually right here over two of the blood cast-off stains on top of this railing, which makes him think that, well, the White Claw box was moved and put, purposefully over these blood stains, when it wasn't. It was right here the whole time, and if he would have noticed that and done his job correctly, he would have been able to clearly explain in his report that that had to be made by somebody walking down the stairs. So this is where I question his 30 years of crime scene expertise, but it's not the first place I question it, because all he's doing is pushing the same Dateline narrative bullcrap in this thing.
This offender went right upstairs to the third floor, attacked the girls and killed the girls up there, then encountered Zainab in the kitchen on the way out, and she ran down the hallway and they chased her down and killed her and killed Ethan as well.
So with his 30 years of crime scene recreation experience, everything that we know now, he regurgitates the Dateline narrative to a T, except he just adds the caveat of they, like there was two of them running down the stairs and chasing Xana from the kitchen into the bedroom where they unalived Xana and Ethan. So to me, it seems like it's pushing a narrative that it's just Kohberger and somebody else. That's what I'm getting from this. But I would expect somebody with 30 years of crime scene experience to be able to account for everything in this crime scene. So maybe when I first heard him say this, I thought, man, well, maybe he knows something I don't know because he's got all this experience. I mean, he must be able to explain why he's putting Xana in the kitchen. There must be some kind of evidence from this. Now, I believe his initial assessment was based on Sutton's report, because it wasn't him that figured out the numbering system was wrong. It was defense expert Matthew Nodal, and I'll show you that here in just a minute. So I think a lot of his determinations was based off of Sutton's determinations. But maybe he's got a great answer for putting Xana in the kitchen, right? Maybe he's not ignoring a bunch of evidence to do that. And I applaud Ron for asking this question, and the response that Turvey gives, I just about sat down on the floor and went, you gotta be kidding me, guy.
I think in Chris's book, he mentioned that it appears there's evidence that Xana was first encountered, at least by the killer or killers, in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Is there evidence of that? Because a lot of people have tied, there was initially some an indication that Xana's blood was on the beer pong table, which turns out that was a mistake by Sutton. What other evidence was there of Xana initially being encountered in the kitchen area?
Ethan was drunk and asleep. Ethan was drunk and asleep in the bedroom. Right? They'd all been out drinking that night. Okay, they were all intoxicated. So he's asleep in the bedroom. She orders her food. She receives her food, and she's eating it in the kitchen. Part of it can be found in the kitchen where she's eating, and she's on TikTok, going through TikTok and doing stuff. Then you find some of that food in her bedroom. All right? Those two things show she was started out in the kitchen eating and then wound up in the bedroom, because that's where we know that's where she died.
And I really thought he was going to enlighten us on some physical evidence that he used to determine this, but no. His evidence that Xana was caught in the kitchen was there was food of hers found in the kitchen, which, yeah, there was a bag on the counter and a box of fries on top of the microwave. There certainly wasn't anything on the floor. And the plate of food that Xana actually made that food with was found inside of her door on the floor, and fries all over the room. And there's blood evidence when she opened the door that she was attacked. Yet, because there's no blood of Xana anywhere in the living room whatsoever, yet somebody that was chasing her would have had to sling blood everywhere trying to attack her. But He's saying Xana was so swift of foot, she had that plate of food in her hand, ran all the way through the living room around the pong table like a ninja with a plate of food, not spilling one drop, and made it all the way to inside her door where she finally was attacked and dropped it. He expects us to believe that when Xana had a BAC level of 2.7, which means she could barely even walk, and she's somehow outrunning two perpetrators through all this maze without dropping a tiny bit of food. And what would he have to ignore to even believe that? Well, he would first of all have to ignore Kaylee's blood on the pong table. So does he account for it?
Well, the beer pong table is boring to me. I'm not interested in that. There's so many other bigger issues to talk about. The beer pong table has no relevance in my mind whatsoever. Let me say something that's going to be offensive, and I don't mean to offend anyone. Unless if you are offended, try not to take it.
We have thick skin.
Thank God. I don't believe anything. Belief is a word that means accepting without proof. I don't believe anything. I don't believe anything. I don't have any of that issue. All right. So, so when you ask me, do I believe this? Do I believe that? I don't believe anything. I require proof. I base my findings, my expert forensic findings, on facts and evidence. Ethan was drunk and asleep in the bedroom. When you ask me, do I believe this? Do I believe that? I don't believe anything. I require proof. I base my findings, my expert forensic findings, on facts and evidence. She orders her food. She receives her food, and she's eating it in the kitchen. Part of it can be found in the kitchen where she's eating, and she's on TikTok, going through TikTok and doing stuff. Then you find some of that food in her bedroom. All right? Those two things show she was started out in the kitchen eating and then wound up in the bedroom, because that's where we know that's where she died. When you ask me, do I believe this? Do I believe that? I don't believe anything. I require proof. I base my findings, my expert forensic findings, on facts and evidence. Well, the beer pong table is boring to me. I'm not interested in that. There's so many other bigger issues to talk about. The beer pong table has no relevance in my mind whatsoever.
With respect to the one shoe print that they were able to find with the Amido Black right at the opening of Dylan's door.
Right.
What can you tell us, or what did you find interesting or important with that?
There's no value to it that I can see. When you ask me, do I believe this? Do I believe that? I don't believe anything. I require proof. I base my findings, my expert forensic findings, on facts and evidence.
So once again, when I go to the Sutton report, and it's a rebuttal to reports by defense experts Matt Nodal and Brent Turvey, and I noticed that it says that Sutton wants to address the discrepancy in DNA testing results related to the following stains identified in my original report issued on August 29, 2024, as described in the report prepared by Matt Nodal. Mr. Nodal reported that the numbers reflected on the placards depicted in the scene photographs were not the same as the sample numbers used when the evidence was submitted to the laboratory for testing. One needed to increase the placard number by 6 to correlate to the intake number, the pre-logging number, used when samples were submitted to the laboratory for testing. So it was Mr. Nodal who pointed this out to Sutton, not Dr. Turvey. So Dr. Turvey apparently based a lot of his determinations on the Sutton original report. And then you can tell by the way that he talks about the crime scene evidence that once the new findings of Mr. Nodal that those placards were all wrong and it wasn't Xana's blood anywhere in the freaking living room, he has confirmation bias and he just can't get his mind around it. So at that point, he chooses just to ignore the evidence, such as the pong table. It's not Xana's blood anywhere in the living room. Then he wants us to believe that she grabbed a plate of food, ran all the way from the attackers into her bedroom before being attacked without spilling one drop, without them getting one strike on Xana, even though they've slung blood everywhere trying to attack her. And Xana was almost 3 times the legal limit as far as her alcohol consumption. You base your findings on facts and evidence, not beliefs. It sounds to me like you base all your findings on beliefs, and I believe you're incorrect once again. and I'm done with this guy.